Hello and welcome to Gateway Workbook 2. So your Gateway Workbook 2 will look on the front cover a little bit like this, which is slightly different colours to Gateway 1. And Gateway Workbook 2 has 2 units involved in it, but today I'm doing an online tutorial for the first unit, which is in that book, which is 11097. The unit standard name is called Listen Actively, Gain Information in an Interactive Situation. This unit standard is worth 3 credits at level 3. Just some instructions for you once again. Please use only blue or black pen, no twank or whiteout. If you make a mistake, cross it out and do it again. And also you can attach extra paper if you require it for your answers. The very first thing I want to explain is that this is about listening very carefully in a conversation with someone and being able to gain enough information to respond or to give back some answers to that person on a verbal note or any way possible correctly. So first what we will be doing is looking at the workbook, and I do recommend that you look at the tips that we give you throughout this workbook. It helps you answer those questions. First thing is the recommended time to complete. So in the first task, it's saying that you need maybe 1.5, so 1.5 hours to do this. So make sure that you're spending roughly around that time on that first question. It can be work-based, as it says here, so you can do that in your work placement, or you can answer it later, but it needs to be about something that's happened during your work placement. So first we discuss some non-verbal ways to talk to someone. This is a way of speaking to someone without actually using words or sound. So types of non-verbal ways and techniques are hand gestures, so it might be directing someone where to go. It's eye contact, so looking at someone in the eye when you're talking to them to make sure they understand you. Posture, the way you're sitting, the way you're standing, even if it's waiting around, even with no customers that you can see. It's facial expressions, which is smiling, raising the eyebrows with a look of surprise, or frowning if it's a look of disappointment. Proximity, that is the distance from you and another person. There is all different types of ways of using your body language, and you need to understand that body language and all the things I've just mentioned actually makes up 55% of talking to someone. And it is the largest part of actually talking to someone, and it's the most important. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it with your body. So making sure that you understand also about understanding what someone's saying to you. So there are things that you can do to clarify or to check that what they're saying to you is correct. Now this particularly might have happened when you first started your work placement, and your supervisor or whoever's looking after you has given you some very strict instructions. You will need to listen very carefully, but you also might not understand everything being said. So there's some different techniques for you to be able to find out more information, to clarify that. The first thing is paraphrasing. Now, what this means is that, for example, if you don't understand something that I'm saying, then I might say it in another way so that you understand it better. So that could be, for example, you need to paraphrase. So you might not know what the word paraphrase means. So I'll say, instead of paraphrase, I'll word it like this. So you need to use other words to describe what I'm trying to tell you. What I just did then was paraphrasing, using other ways of explaining something to make it easier to understand. You might do that with one of the customers that you serve, or one of the people you interact with within your team. Summarizing, very important. So it's about getting information from someone, and what you're going to do is repeat some of that really important information so that they know you've understood. So it could be like your supervisor saying, so you need to do A, B, and C. And at the end of explaining how to do A, B, and C, you then go, okay, I'm going to go now and do A, B, and C. You've repeated what they've said. You've summarized. Questioning. Questioning is very, very important. And it's not seen as you maybe acting like you're not listening properly, it's not seen by an employer as something that, how come they don't get it? It's not at all. If you need to ask a question because you don't understand on your placement how to do something, you need to ask it. It actually looks like you have confidence, that you want to learn, and you have a keen willingness personality. That is something an employer is going to like. So please don't forget, please ask questions. So questioning is just so that you can understand more about something that you need to do. So it could be like, for example, someone's explained that they might be away for an hour, your supervisor who's looking after you, and they've given you instructions of what to do in that hour. But what they haven't done is told you who you can ask questions of if you don't know the answer. So a good question for you to do is say, I know that you're going to be away for an hour and that I need to do this, this and this, but who do I go to because you're not here for help if I need it? That is a question, that's a good question to ask. That is questioning. So there's some top tips throughout this book. Please read that because it's going to help you answer the very important questions in this assessment. The task explanation is paraphrasing. So the task explanation is actually giving you another way to understand what we're asking you in the assessment. So you need to refer to certain pages in your workbook to answer that. That states what pages you need to refer to. It also says that you need to choose 2 different conversations that you've had with someone on placement. That's all. 2 conversations. All the answers in this assessment is based on those 2 conversations. So when you're having a conversation, when you first start with your supervisor, or you're getting training, or you're learning to do something new, please make sure that you're remembering what's happening during that time, because you're going to need to answer the questions in your Gateway workbook about that. So the first task is, during your work experience, you have probably had some conversations, and I hope you have spoken at least to some of the peers in your company, or on your placement wherever you are, even with customers, other employees, people walking by, just general chit chat. Now you've communicated with some people, so spoken to some people, you're going to need to choose 2 different events, so 2 different conversations that you've had, and you're going to have to answer the following questions. You do have to use paraphrasing, so you have to show in this, when you paraphrased, you have to be able to show when you've summarized, so when you've maybe given a bit of a conclusion at the end and concluded any points, and you have to mention about when you've questioned, so any questions you've asked. So it's broken it down into some questions here. First question is, what information did you gain in the event? So that simply is, what information have you got out of a conversation with somebody else? What was the end result? What did you get out of that person? Then the second question is, what were your responses to non-verbal clues, and how did these fit the subject? Now what that is asking you to do is what non-verbal stuff, so all that stuff we first spoke about, eye contact, hand gestures, what kind of things were used in that conversation with that person? Did they point to where they needed to go? Did they use hand gestures? Did they look directly in your eye so that you felt like you could actually listen to them properly? What were the non-verbal stuff you used? Did it suit the subject? Did it suit what was happening? And an example answer would be, when you first started, maybe the manager used eye contact with you when describing exactly the things you had to do when you first started, and it did suit the situation because you first started and you needed to understand what he was saying. What did you paraphrase during that conversation? So what did you use as an easier way to say things to that person? So remember, paraphrasing is using simpler words or changing your words so that they can understand. It could be you paraphrased when you asked the question because you didn't quite know how to ask the question. What did you summarize during talking to someone else? So what did you confirm at the end? Okay, so I need to do this, this, and this then. That's called confirming things. That's summarizing. What questions did you ask to clarify information. Simply write what questions you asked. Then, as you can see, it needs to be dated, it needs to be signed by your supervisor or someone in your work placement, and you need to write the time that this whole event and communication happened. Without that and the company name on there, you won't be correct in that. Even if you've answered everything right, you do need it signed. Then you need to answer the same questions on a separate conversation. So you'll need to answer based on 2 different conversations that you've had. Now the next part of the assessment and the last part is about responding. So this is all about you talking to somebody else. Now it's about you listening to them answer. So responding. Again, different communication techniques when you're communicating with another person. Okay, there's a responsibility for 2 people, you and that person. So, body language. Did you use any of that body language we talked about? Hand gestures. Did they use any of it when they responded to you? Mirroring. Now what that is just like when you look in a mirror, you see your reflection. If you smile, they smile. If you waved goodbye, they waved goodbye. That is called mirroring. Active listening. Did you really hear every detail? Paraphrasing. Again, did you use more simpler words? Did they use a simple word instead of something that you didn't understand? Feedback. That's the response. Clarity of speech. How clear was it spoken? Voice modulation. Did you change the tone of voice or was it monotone? Grammar. Make sure that there was no slang words or choice or anything like that. Make sure it was very clear, proper, full words. Questioning skills. What questions were asked? Grammar is very important when speaking to your work supervisor. The silence. Was there a bit of silence in between there when you were talking? As in, because they asked a question, there was a small silence to be able to think about the answer. There's some things that you need to be aware of between cultures as well. Cultural awareness is very important so that you don't offend the person you're speaking to. New Zealand is one of the most diverse nations in this world. We're very lucky that we have equality, which is everyone is treated equal, and that should be the case. But to be aware of someone else's culture means that that would be a good thing so we don't offend them. Some of the things to be aware of is, for example, some expressions that we do in New Zealand could offend other people. Invitations, for example, as well. Some people need more advanced warning for invitations. Eye contact. In some cultures, eye contact is actually disrespectful. What about body awareness? How close are you to the other person? Again, sometimes more distance is more respectful, and then sometimes not enough distance is disrespectful. Wearing certain clothing. Sometimes that could offend some cultures, especially if you're wearing a very short pair of shorts or short skirt. Beliefs. Many cultures have different types of beliefs. So, over the last page, how can we make it better? Here's some bullet points at the end of this section about how you can understand someone's culture better and not offend them. So, your last task is about those 2 different communication events again. You need to discuss about the response, the answer. This must include 2 different events. This must include the techniques we spoke about before in this workbook and about some emotions about using appropriate information for the actual whole conversation. Again, it's broken into different questions, so this will be answered if you answer each question. First question is write your response to the person that you're communicating with. What was your response to an event of communication? So it could be when your work supervisor gave you some information, what did you give back to them? Then the next question is, how did you recall the message to check for accuracy and meaning? So what that's asking you is, how did you understand what was being said so that you could respond properly? Did you use the clarifying information? Did you paraphrase? Did you use body language, nodding, mirroring? Did you copy their body language? So how did you actually recall that message? What did you do to cater for that culture of that person? Now, if that person was the same culture as you, you can describe that and describe that I acted as I would normally act, because being the same culture, I would imagine that you would act similar. So you need to actually discuss that. If they're not from the same culture, did you limit your eye contact because you know that that's not something that they do a lot? You could actually ask questions about that person's culture in a very sensitive way and ask, what kind of things does, someone in your culture like or dislike when you're talking to one another? And you know what? For you to be able to actually act that way towards them is very respectful. How did you respond to the emotions of that person? So if the emotions were limited because they were giving you instructions, well, then you didn't show any emotion because it was a very serious part of a conversation that you needed to show that you understood. So you need to think about that. Then you need to get that signed. Of course, you need to date it and time the actual time that conversation took place. Put the company name as well, please. Now, it says communication event 2. So, like I said at the beginning of this last task of the unit standard, you do need to make sure that you discuss 2 different responses. So, it's 2 different events. And that is the final section once you've completed that task of this unit standard. Once you've completed it, please refer back to your instructions sheet. As mentioned, make sure you check your work. All questions need to be attempted if you do want to be marked correct in this assessment. Once we've marked this, again, if you need to do any extra information to answer the question correctly, all you need to reset is that portion you've got incorrect. Notes will be given to you, and you can do that within 2 weeks from the date we send that reset to you. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to email gateway@itc.co.nz. Please refer, if you would like to our Gateway Facebook group page as well if you need any help. And good luck with your assessment.